Hey dude, what's up? Sure, I have some free time. Something wrong? Oh, awesome. Yeah, of course I can. Any particular story you were thinking of? Oh boy, the Titanomachy. That's a big subject. No pun intended. So, where are we starting from? How much do you know? Is this like fill in fine details in the main story, or are you walking in totally blind? Totally blind. Then a tall order. I mean, okay, I can explain it, but it's going to take a lot of context. You know how I like to skip the interesting bits, ignore all the prologue? Yeah, we can't do that here. I'll have to start from the very beginning. You sure you're up for that? Alright then. Take a seat. This'll take a while. First, there was nothing. Then, there was Calvin. Or wait, chaos. There was chaos. Well, the two might be kind of the same. No, I'm not sorry. I will make all the Calvin and Hobbes references I damn well want. Thank you very much. Anyway, there was nothing and then there was chaos. Or maybe the nothing was chaos. Just an endless sea of formlessness. The only true word for it, nothingness. Because there wasn't anything for it to be everything. This is the kind of concept that doesn't really describe well. And there have been enough different translations that it could mean a lot of different things. I think to go with the chaos was the only thing there was version though. It seems to fit a little better than just appearing from the void. Regardless, at some point there was chaos, which didn't mean what we think of it as. There were no falling pianos, things on fire, or random emus running around. Just formlessness, a lack of order, and after a long time, this lack of order became sentient. How? Why? Don't know. But it makes a kind of sense if you think about it. Alright, your eyes are starting to glaze over. I won't get into the philosophy of sentience tonight. Chaos became a thinking being, and it was happy for a time, chilling there, the only thing in the universe. Happy for a time, so long the entire history of the world is an eye blink. Next to it, but as before, things couldn't stay the same forever. Chaos eventually got lonely, and I'm aware I have no clue how something that had only ever been the only thing in the universe only conceptualized the idea of another being, which thus came to the conclusion that it wanted companionship. I guess the physical embodiment of lack of rules doesn't really have to care about things like logic and inconvenibility. Though the word really doesn't mean what we think it means. Shush you. Chaos got lonely, so it decided to create a companion from its own substance. How this created something that wasn't more chaos, the world will never know. Geez, I've been saying that a lot lately. I guess this is the kind of subject that defines easy description. Humans aren't really meant to comprehend primordial and forces like that. It'll break your brain if you think about it too long. Regardless, the new companion, Gia, the earth, chaos created her. All the mountains and forests and jungles and deserts and assorted other Minecraft biomes, and the whole thing became sentient. Yes, it did. Of course it did. Was that even a question at this point? Gia came to life, and for another long time, the two were happy together. I have no clue what their relationship was. Like parent-child, friendship, romance, just sitting in companionable silence? Don't know. But it could have been almost anything. It doesn't really matter because after a while, Gia decided that it wasn't enough for her. She realized that being a formless nothingness wasn't exactly the conversational companion, I guess. And so she wanted to make someone, of course, legends say that she wanted to do a lot more than talking, and just that's what she needed someone else for. But that kind of selfishness isn't for this story now, is it? So she took a bunch of Chaos's essence, I guess I didn't mind, and formed it into a newbie. Only she wasn't very good at it. Maybe Chaos was better at working with its own essence. Maybe Gia was just a 1 in a billion fluke. I don't know. But Gia's first creation, another primordial force named Pontus, ended up being twisted and stunted, incapable of doing much on his own, and he was the oceans, or some would say the waters. All of them. He couldn't really love Gia and didn't make for good conversation either. I'm not gonna say he was a child, but he wasn't. But he definitely was childlike. And Gia wasn't into that. So she decided to try again. I mean, I wouldn't say that. After all, if at first you don't succeed right, and she did improve, this time she made Tartarus, the pit. And he was better, stronger, independent, capable of standing on his own, apart from her, and capable of doing anything else. You see, somehow in her desire to make him more separate from her than Pontus was, she made it so that they could never actually touch or interact. Yet, not ideal. So by this point, the empty spot inside her was aching, and she was truly desperate to make a deity that could fill it in. This is where I would tell you to get your mind out of the gutter if I hadn't fully intended that double entry. You welcome to stay down there if you desire. But something I haven't talked about yet. Every time she used Chaos Essence to create something new, she shrunk Chaos itself, weakened it. She didn't want to destroy her progenitor entirely. She just wanted someone new to be with. She told herself she tried once and only once more, and if it didn't work, resign herself to an eternity of sorrow. So once more she tried. And this time she poured everything she had into it. Her hopes and fears, her loneliness and desire, her love for something that didn't yet exist, and a bit too much of chaos. She used so much the primordial essence of the universe that it forced chaos away. Deep into hibernation, not quite dead, but unstable to perform even the limited interactions it had before. For all intents, the purpose is gone, and Gia would have been sad except being she created was perfect. Uranus. The sky is strong, powerful, beautiful as the stars. Not reliant on her, but not as inaccessible. With him came galaxies and constellations, and the sun above the earth. And Gia was pleased. He wasn't malformed, or he wasn't too far away. Nothing about him was missing at all. Except, oh dear, his soul. More on that in a minute. For now, Gia had finally found a companion, and didn't even know if they nectared and dined each other before jumping into baby making, because babies were made fast. Yeah, that does kind of lend weight to the whole more horny than lonely thing. But I suppose awareness could help with both. Regardless of what happened first, though there were children on the way, and when they came, there were 12 of them. Dodispolits? Yeah, that must have been one hell of a teething era. But they were as beautiful as their parents, strong and shining like stars. You already know who these guys are. The Titans. And I can definitely remember all their names. This might take a second. Cronus, Oceanus, Hyperion, Ipetus, Krios, Minimosin, Tethys, Themis, Rhea, obviously 2 more. No, don't Google them. I can get it. Just another second. You didn't have to Google it, you jerk. I would have gone Thea and Phoebe God. I can't believe I forgot the only 2 with normal names. How does that even work in my brain? I can only remember things that are hard to remember. Explains why I never know any of my passwords, I guess. Okay, so 12 shining stars, perfect children walking the earth and under the sky, and when Gia looked upon them, she felt love. And when Uranus looked upon them, he was pleased. Their nice little utopia didn't last very long, though because someone felt the need to make more babies, don't know which, maybe both, but sky and land went back at it. And little while later, out popped more children, only triplets this time. Thankfully, these, however, were less beautiful than the Titans. Brutish, malformed, and misshapen, lumpy with muscles, even just out of the womb, and with a single gigantic eye in the middle of their foreheads. These were Cyclops, and Gia looked upon them and felt just as much love as she had for her eldest children. Uranus, however, did not. Yeah, we both know what's about to happen. He decided that these 3 were monsters, an insult to him and his divinity. And he would not stomach them walking under his all-seeing gaze. He took the newborn triplets from their mother and cast them far away into Tartarus, where he would never have to look at them again, and where Gia could not reach to bring them home. He knew that as children of the sky and earth, they would grow up to wield serious power. So he created a guardian, a gatekeeper, and a jailer. A monster even more terrifying than them, whose purpose was to raise the Cyclops to keep their heads down and their spirits broken, to make sure they never tried to leave the pit they'd been cast into. Can't be, frankly, the less said about her, the better. Yeah, some old legends can stay buried, especially ones that are nightmare-inducing. Oh, of course Gia was upset. She screamed in rage, tried to hold on to her children, punched and kicked Uranus. Earthquakes, continental shifts, tectonic rearrangements, etc. But she was weak after just giving birth, and Uranus was strong. He took the Cyclops, and there was nothing Gia could do but weep. I swear to God, this is not the time to make "he took the kids" joke. This is a serious moment. And, okay, fine. It was kind of funny. Fuck you, though. Yeah. So anyway, after that whole debacle was over, there was a shocking lack of fallout. Really. I mean, yes, Gia was upset, but the Titans couldn't really bring themselves to care about siblings they'd never met. The other primal forces weren't paying much attention. And Uranus was content to pretend the whole thing never happened. He even wanted to try again for more kids. Yeah, I don't want to think about how that conversation went. Hey, honey, let's have another baby. Why? So you can throw it into hell again? No. But I guess he figured out how to be charming again, offering back ropes and putting on the mood music. Or maybe she just decided that this time wouldn't go as wrong as previously. That there's no way he'd throw away 2 sets of children, because she eventually agreed. Soon enough, more babies were on the way. When they came, the earth shook. 3 giants. Yep, more triplets. There seemed to be a theme. Each the size of a mountain, with 50 faces and 100 arms. They were called the Hecatoncheers. But since that word is completely unpronounceable and I can't say it more than once, we'll just go with 100-handed ones. 3 guesses as to what Uranus thought of him. Into the pit they go. So now Gia was completely disillusioned. Uranus was still beautiful, but all she could see was the horror of unending void where his soul should have been. But that actually kind of makes sense. It wasn't supposed to. I was just going to joke about how the darkness of space goes on forever, but that's a valid metaphor for a soul. Am I secretly a good writer? Okay, yeah, only on accident, that makes sense. Anyway, Gia was pissed. Peeved, ticked off, upset, irate, fuming, miffed. Oh, I have so many. We ain't even got to splenetic yet. Just hold for a second. Fine, Killjoy. Gia mad. Big mad. She couldn't do anything about it. Because even if she hadn't been tired from the effort of giving birth to the 100-handed ones, Uranus was strong, like much stronger than her. She did come first, yeah, but that doesn't mean that wasn't the most important thing here. Uranus was made out of more chaos essence than she was. In trying to make him perfect, she made him powerful. Maybe thinking that the two were the same. I don't know. But she couldn't win that fight. Not on her own. Well, who else could she possibly enlist to kill the sky? Let's think. Uranus himself, unlikely. Chaos? No, too asleep. Pontus? No, too useless. Tartarus? No, too untouchable. Her Cyclops and 100-handed ones? Maybe, if they were just a little nearer. Wait, idea. Yeah, okay. Thank you for stealing my thunder. I wanted to say that. No, it's fine. It's not like I'm the one telling the story or anything. Well, I don't want to say it now. The fun's gone out of it. Fine. She went to her first children, the Titans, for help. None of them individually had the power the primal deities packed, but each one was still serious threat, and there were 12 of them. She figured all of them together could handle Uranus. To even the odds even more, though, she came to them bearing a gift, something that had never been created before, never even conceived. A gift made out all her rage and grief and love turned to burning hatred, made out of adamant and iron and blood, a sickle, a weapon. No, this is a thing. Before this, no one had ever even considered killing each other. There had been squabbles and roughhousing between the Titans, of course, but no serious anger. Even if there had been, no one would have considered using an outside implement as a powerful amplifier. Fights were won on your own strength and divine might. Uranus would never see it coming, because he hadn't thought about the possibility. I guess Gia was able to come up with it through her sheer rage. My life would be better if this person didn't exist. I should make him not exist. And then she got to turn him into a tiny little piece via sharp implements. From there, once she'd figured that out, all that was left was to convince the Titans to kill him. Well, he was their father after all. He'd always been good to them, and besides, he was scary. None of them wanted to mess with that. Oceanus was the first to dip out. He didn't want any kind of smoke. He just wanted to keep chilling in the waters with his brother, cousin, uncle. Yeah, let's call him Uncle Pontus. After Oceanus, all the girls were out at once. They conferred amongst themselves and decided that they were all pacifists. Not a term that means very much before the first real act of violence, but they were staying out of it nonetheless. 4 of the remaining 5 were kind of looking at each other nervously. None of them wanted to let their mom down, but, were they really cut out for this? And what would happen if they weren't? What would happen even if they were? How would things work afterward? None of them wanted to say it. But they were all thinking, I can't do this. One of the others should. As hard as they could, I can't really blame them for that. I mean, patricide isn't really something to just do on a casual Tuesday. They were all freaking out about it a bit. One of them wasn't freaking out at all. The youngest, the one who'd always been a little crooked, who'd seen the world a little differently. The one who saw this sickle and finally understood what power meant and understood what he wanted all of it. Yeah, you know who I'm talking about? Cronus. History's first killer, according to the Greeks. Cronus took the sickle, his eyes glowing and his smile crooked. He already had a plan. Yeah, Gia probably should have seen the bad signs here. But she loved her children, and she was blinded by rage. She told Cronus if he killed Oronus and freed his brothers from Tartarus, he could be king and rule over all living beings. Well, the legends aren't super clear there. It's distinctly possible that Oronus was the king before all of this. Yeah, but there's another interpretation. Rulers and the ruled came into being as a concept. With the first weapon, they were tied together. Gia and Cronus both realized instinctively that as long as there was a such thing as power, someone would have the most power, and everyone would have to do what he said, or else. This way of understanding the world would have consequences later. Maybe it's a little less frightening to view power as distinct from the ability to kill. Maybe it's not as real though. I don't really know whether there was a throne before there was a way to remove the one sitting on it, a crown before there was a way to remove the wearer's head. But regardless, they were both afterward, and Cronus planned to be the one with both. You're right. Once the first implement of death was envisioned, it could have been copied fairly easily. But our Titan of Time wasn't going to give up anything he didn't have to. Oh yeah, didn't I mention that? Cronus was the Lord of Time. That's where we got chronological order. Cronus is still ordering people around. Let's not go down that path of thought, okay? Let's just back to our casual description of violent patricide. It's less unsettling. Yeah, so Cronus had the plan. All he needed was his brother's assistance. The remaining 4 were still scared, but none of them wanted to look like pussies after their youngest brother was willing to do the deed. So they were all agreed to kill the sky. Okay, that's a good question. Yes, the sky is still up there, but that doesn't actually... No. You know what? No, I'll explain it when we get there. Patience, Grasshopper, you'll understand it. I promise. It's Simpler than philosophy, alright? It has to be, otherwise I wouldn't understand it either. Am I allowed to continue now? Thank you, Your Highness. So the first step of Kronos' cunning plan involved Gia. She had to lure Uranus down from the sky, or lure his avatar, or his presence, or his awareness, or something. The actual overhead sky that was his body couldn't fall on them, obviously, but he had to come down to Earth in some kind of avatar form, since this was the way he'd come down to smash in the past. The way forward was clear. Okay, look, how metaphysical do you want to get? Because I guarantee you don't want me to go into a whole lecture circuit on the gods' avatars and how they were distinct from them, but part of them and they're entirely all at this exact time, or how interactions between the anthropomorphic personifications of primordial forces actually work in a scientific sense. Are you going to tell me you want that? Well, then you're just going to have to accept that Uranus could come down from his body, which was the actual heavens or overhead, and into a body that walked the earth, and that kind of non-capitalized body was the only way he could be killed. It was also the only way he could tap Gia's ass, though, so he was very willing to put himself in a vulnerable position. Right, especially since he had no reason to think of it as vulnerability, he still had full access to his power. And he obviously wasn't worried about his own children or wife attacking him. Probably he'd never even conceptualized true violence. He didn't kill the Cyclops or the 100-handed ones, did he? He tossed them where he didn't have to look at them. He felt totally safe going down into his avatar because he never known what it was like to feel unsafe again. Just not a concept that made sense to him. Yes, not yet. He was about to learn, but before that, he got a phone call from Gia. Hey babe, what's up? The way you threw those kids with your big, muscly arms was just so damn hot. On my way. Yeah, no, I got no idea how he fell for it either. I guess the sky isn't a job title that requires exceptional brains. So he comes down to their avatar's usual meeting spot on the surface, all ready for a good time, and he sees Gia standing there, wearing her nicest outfit, or maybe lack therefore. Stories aren't super clear. And she's holding up the most winning smile she's got. She has to, or he'll get suspicious. Even if she wants nothing more than to jump up and use that sickle on the bastard herself. And Uranus is walking toward her, bottle of fancy champagne in hand. Yes, even without a France, there was champagne. Deal with it. Bedroom eyes right on her, getting more excited by the sec. Now, Kronos and the others had been hiding beneath a rock the whole time, so that the sky couldn't see them. When Uranus got close enough, Kronos gave the signal, and the four Koios, Krios, Hyperion, and Iapetus jumped his ass. This wasn't just a physical struggle naturally. All of them were exerting as much divine might as they could, because it was the only way they even stood a chance. They weren't trying to get into a drawn-out fight with their dad, because he'd beat them into a pulp, and they knew it. They just needed to knock him down, so the four leaped at him and overbore him. like hounds jumping onto a stag, or maybe a moose, for the sheer bulk. Once Orenus realized what was happening, he started struggling, trying to throw his kids away so he could get to his feet and figure out what the fuck was going on. He wasn't exactly in the most present frame of mind because of how hard he was focused on Gia and how hard he was focused on Gia, so his reaction time was a little slow, just slow enough for each Titan to catch a flailing limb and pin him down. They couldn't hold long because, well, have you ever tried to hold down the sky? Not winning battle long term, but they could hold him long enough for Cronus to approach with the sickle. I don't know if he gave some kind of speech or if he just let his mother talk or if he just smiled before he did the deed. But yeah, trigger warning, blood and gore. Oh, good memory. Yeah, Rena's blood. Technically Ichor, but blood spilling everywhere has some extended consequences, namely the creation of life on Earth where two struck spirits of nature sprung up, as well as monsters and other things. None of that was super relevant yet, but it will be later. For now, the relevant thing was that the sky was dead and thus about to fall. No, this isn't a fable. Will be no chicken running around with an acorn. There will only be very quick action from the Titans through some kind of magical or deific means. They basically nailed the sky to the sky. They did something at each of the four corners of the earth to make sure that Orenus' corpse wouldn't collapse and crush everything. Yeah, I'm aware. Very non-specific. I do not know what it required them. The four Titans that were in Kronos all had to stay there. Well, not permanently, sort of. They all had to leave a chunk of their power in one of the corners of the earth, and those places became where they were based, but their physical selves could still do stuff elsewhere. That's how Koios, Krios, Ipietas, and Hyperion became the Titans of the cardinal directions north, south, east, and west. I have no idea if it's in that order or not, though I legitimately do not remember. I know Hyperion was associated with the sun, which leads himself to either east or west. I think Krios might have been south. Yeah, you're right, it doesn't matter overly much. The four can considered relatively interchangeable for the purposes of overarching story. They each had their own things mostly related to their later children, but yeah, in the Titanomachy, one was as good as another. I'm going to get smited for that, aren't I? It'll be fine. Yes, smited is the correct past tense. Our future perfect tense? Something English hard. Regardless, yes, smited. I looked it up recently in preparation for this moment exactly like this. You know me. I always come prepared not to give English lessons, obviously, but to talk about Greek myths. I'm always prepared for a mythology discussion or lecture, as the case may be. Oh yeah, back to said lecture. So Uranus killed his body, hung from the ceiling like a much more macabre weekend at Bernie's. The Titans now fatherless, with all that implies, nature's spirits running around everywhere, and Cronus king on high, ruling from a palace he built or will summoned into existence, more likely on Mount Orthreus, the tallest mountain in the world. Sounds nice, doesn't it? One problem. We've forgotten somebody, or 6 somebodies. Yep, Kronos promised he'd free his brothers from Tartarus so that they could be with G again. Only didn't really feel like it. Yeah, no getting past Kampa would have been taking some real effort, and it's not like he'd ever meet those guys. And when you came right down to it, Arenas had a point, right? I mean, they were pretty ugly. King of the 12 gorgeous titans, and then also these 6 weird dudes with gross bodies and messed up faces. Kronos wasn't sure about that. Of course, you see where he's coming from, right? It was only reasonable to break his promise. He would have been mightily inconvenienced otherwise. Besides, who's gonna make him do it? Gia, she's too weakened and looking less likely to regain her strength by the day. One of the other titans, not likely. Even if they cared, he had the sickle, so they were gonna get with him. Damned program. And the weirdo freaks he didn't care about were gonna stay where they belonged, right? That's what I thought. What he thought, that's what he thought. And pretty much that's how it went. Gia was upset, of course, but she was feeling so tired. Now, nowhere that I've read actually specifies this, but from the context clues, I believe that she put too much of her personal power into making the sickle. It's not just that it was a weapon, that it was the first weapon, that it was a divine power amplifier. It also has the vessel for all the Gia's rage, and with it quite a lot of her strength. Kronos wielding it was far from more terrifying and unstoppable than Kronos with any other sickle. Even if there had been another sickle and Gia wanted that, when she created it, she had wanted Arenas dead, but now, well, she had some regrets, but there wasn't anything she could do about them. She needed to rest, and rest she did. Gia was silent for a long time after that. I'm so glad you asked that. Kronos having discovered the joys of ruling over others, stabbing things that got in his way, and eating good food because somewhere along the way they'd figure out that food was a thing and it tasted nice. He decided that all that was really left was sex. Seems fairly logical to me. Yeah, less logical was his next decision and that of his brothers. Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's not the worst thing because deities don't really have genetics, so inbreeding wasn't an issue, but still, bleh. You said it. Anyway, the sister he went with was Rhea, the most beautiful and most powerful of them all. He was the king, so no one had a real say, Rhea included. At least the other 10 got to choose their own pairings, I think. Well, I wasn't there, was I? But I think they all did, regardless. Though even everyone started making with the babies. Out of the various units came new titans like Atlas, Prometheus, Selene, and Helios, and a shit ton of nature spirits like the Oceanus, Cronus, and Rhea Haver didn't have any children for a long time. I'm not sure why, but time her first bump started showing, most of the other young Titans were already full-grown adults, some with children of their own. I suppose it could have been a function of Titanic metabolism. Okay, I mean, hey, as far as I know, all of them were born full grown, and it was just Cronus' children who weren't, but in the absence of any evidence whatsoever, we're just gonna go with it took a while to conceive. But once they did conceive, they were both overjoyed. Yep, you heard me right. Even Cronus. He'd seen his brothers running around with their kids and felt a little envy. He was looking forward to that rush of fatherly love, to actually having a child he could spend time with. Unfortunately, things didn't work out that way. Yes, see, eventually Rhea's time came, and out popped a beautiful, perfect baby girl. Rhea and Cronus were both overjoyed until Cronus noticed something off. The new baby, newly named Hestia, wasn't a Titan. Her power was different, less rough, more refined, more complex, more dangerous. She couldn't use it yet, obviously, because she was still an infant. But Cronus knew, maybe because of his time powers, maybe just because he was perceptive, that when she grew up, Hestia would be a goddess, the kind of being that could challenge the orders simply by existing. That even if she had less raw power than a Titan, could make them all look like chumps. Kronos wasn't about to be unseated by his own child. No dramatic irony for this ruler of the universe. Nope, but what to do? He couldn't put something like this into Tartarus, even with Campe guarding her. She'd get out eventually. He couldn't kill her either. She was clearly as immortal as her parents. Oh, what? Oh yeah, I didn't make that clear earlier. The Titans were immortal. The primal deities are immortals. Technically, Uranus wasn't even killed. He was just so grievously, horrifically injured that he'd never be able to heal himself. Still alive, but no longer capable of consciousness. Dead is simply an easier shorthand. Yeah, but Kronos couldn't do that to his daughter. For one thing, if she ever did heal, he'd be royally screwed. So he thought fast, asked Rhea to step into the other room, and, well, I think you know what's coming next. Yep, jaws opened inhumanely wide. He went full Donner. Never go full Donner. Especially not on your own child. Well, she wasn't dead. He swallowed her whole, wasn't even injured. Technically just imprisoned, her growth stunted. Cronus knew that nothing would be able to escape his stomach because, well, it wasn't just some prison, it was him. He had total control. Yep, patricide, incest, cannibalism, treachery, the next best thing to infanticide. Kronos is really racking up the criminal charges. I guess he thinks the ruler of the universe can get away with it all. Anyway, Rio screamed and raged, but even if he had wanted to, it's not like Kronos would have reached down his throat and plucked the kid out. Hestia was gone. Things were mighty chilly on Mount Orthrus for a while. But how does a relationship come back from one of the members eating their child? It does seem very plausible, but apparently Rhea found a way to forgive him eventually. Well, you know that Hestia wouldn't be the only child. Kronos had 6 in all. And as to why Rhea kept coming back, I really couldn't say, because Kronos just kept doing it every time a new baby, a new god was born down the hatch. Demeter, then Hera, Hades, Poseidon, each more powerful than the last, each more of a threat. Kronos couldn't risk any of them running around being generous. It was pretty rough in his household for a while. I'd say Rhea constantly weeping and screaming ever present indigestion, judging looks from their siblings. Not the greatest of situations for anyone involved. Finally, though, Rhea decided to get smart. She was pregnant for one last time, and she had an idea. Yeah, that took a while, didn't it? Not exactly the titan of exceeding brain power, but eventually she thought to ask, who do I know that has experience with her husband getting rid of her children? And after giving the matter long and careful consideration, she decided to ask her sister Tethys. No, of course she asked Gia. Obviously, no one's that dumb. So a long time of praying later, remember Gia was very firmly asleep at this time. And the big Earth Mama stirred enough to sense what was going on. She wasn't super able to communicate, but she made a plan and trusted Rhea to figure it out. In the spot where she was praying, a cave formed in the earth. Out of the cave came a group of big dudes clothed in bronze, followed by a group of less big ladies of the motherly persuasion, followed by an absolutely massive goat. And out of the earth, near her feet, up rose a small boulder on a pedestal, approximately the size of a curled up infant. Well, you know what happens next, right? At the very least, you can figure it out, like Rhea did. Of course she had to. The newly created spirits and goat understood their purposes, of course, but none of them could put the desperate purposes together into a coherent plan. That wasn't what they were created to do. Well, the courts, the armored dudes, were created to make noise and lots of it. The nymphs knew everything they'd need to serve as nannies and teachers for a young child. And the goat's udders ran with nectar, the drink of the immortals. No, the stone was just a rock. It did not know its purpose. No, of course it didn't. On account of being a rock, you're not going to let this one go, are you? Fine, maybe the stone was, I don't know, specifically enchanted to feel warm when you held it, or to resist the eroding effects of hyaluronic acid or something like that. If you really want to believe it, it was a sentient rock, magic rock, I guess. I can't stop you. I'm just gonna go with rock, though. Are you starting to put the idea yet? Look, I know you've heard this part of the story before. Everyone's heard this part of the story before. I'll spell it out then, shall I? Rhea would, as soon as the child currently inside her was born, swap him out with Gia's special stone wrapped in the swaddling clothes. Kronos would eat said rock and hopefully not notice the different taste. And Rhea would then run away from him weeping as per usual, except this time she'd be holding the real baby. Safe and sound, she would have to leave him in the cave so her absence from Mount Othrys wouldn't be suspiciously long, and he would be able to drink from the goat's udders. He would be taken care of and taught by the nymphs, and he would be protected and trained by the Korets, who would also make enough noise that even the ears of a Titan couldn't discern the crying baby. All making noise. All making sense? Good. It was making sense to Rhea too, and it worked. When she put it into practice, Kronos ate the rock without any more comment than, damn, that baby was heavy. He would have grown up big. And Rhea got the kid to the cave with no one the wiser. She stayed with the newborn son for a few days, but had to leave eventually. She couldn't stay gone any longer than her usual period of mourning. A few hours of her sisters noticed she was a bit lighter in her step than usual when she returned, but none of them questioned it. I guess they just figured that she was getting numb to the whole affair. Nope, that's not what was happening. She finally had a living child, a son she could spend time with and love, a son she could raise and train and protect, son who could free his siblings and finally get rid of her monster of a husband, son named Zeus. Shit's about to go down. Well, okay, shit's about to go down after a significant period of years. The kid needed to grow up, didn't he? Had to learn how to use his godly powers, how to fight with all manner of opponents, how to do addition and subtraction and all that. Yeah, like subtract one homicidal father, add one universal throne. He knew his purpose from a very young age. He drank it down with his nectar, heard it in every clash of bronze from the Korets' side, felt it seep into his head with every word the nymphs said. Well, that's the thing. He knew that he had to do what he had to do, but he wasn't sure he had the strength to do it. Okay, I have to go on for a bit tangent here. It's necessary context, I promise. So you remember what I said earlier about the differences between gods and titans? Yeah, gods are more refined. As a general rule, they have or can learn the skill needed to match divine energies that with anything, and using their powers is a lot less like driving around a wagon on square wheels. They can do things a titan could never dream of, but it's important to note that all the skill that comes at a necessary cost. They don't have the same raw power, rough as it is for them to use it. In a magical arm wrestling contest, a titan would be a god any day. It's simply a fact of their respective natures. The exception, of course, is Zeus. No, this is absolutely a thing. Zeus was, to put it simply, built different. To put it even more simply, he was him. Not only did he have the usual godly refinement, using divine power was as easy as breathing for him, but he had the sheer raw magical might to step to any titan. There is a reason that all the old myths refer to Zeus as more powerful than the rest of the Olympians put together, and it's because he proved it. I don't know where he got these kind of chops or how he avoided the trade-off of power for skill. And I don't think Rhea or Gia knew either, but both of them were overjoyed when he started showing it. He was the perfect weapon. So all of that makes it sound like this should be easy for him. Roll up the Orthes deck Kronos right in the glass jaw. Take that sickle, cut his siblings free, and live peacefully and unchallengeably as king, right? Well, not quite. Zeus grew up to be both powerful and skilled, yeah, but Kronos had several advantages. For one, he had the sickle, not only a much more effective way of killing than either fists or magic, but a powerful amplifier on divine skill. Nothing that lived could stand against him while he wielded it. Zeus needed a weapon. For another, Kronos had the rest of the Titans, his original brothers, yes, but also a whole crop of new ones, subjects to his rule and doers of his bidding. While not only of them were great sheikhs, some of them, like Atlas, had serious power in and of themselves. And there were many. No one, not Oronas at his strongest, maybe not even Chaos itself, could have beaten them as combined force. Zeus needed allies, fortunately. Of the two things that he needed, one of them he knew where to find. His whole life he'd been told that his brothers and sisters imprisoned in Kronos' stomach, if he could find some way to get them free, he'd have his allies. And they'd all have enough godly power to be one quick training montage away from going toe-to-toe with whatever army Kronos could construct. Well, Zeus was down just going swinging. He knew about the sickle, of course, but he figured he could catch Kronos off guard or away from it, and even if he couldn't, it was difficult for him to conceive a challenge he couldn't master. He knew how that would have gone, though, because cooler heads prevailed in the planning aspect. I think Gia was strong enough to be talking by now, or maybe she's still making her well-known silently and just really good at it, but she managed to convey to Zeus that he had to be sneaky about this. Yeah, the future Thunder God wasn't exactly interested in stealth, but he listened to his Australia's grandmother. He figured out how to disguise his power, make it seem as rough and unfinished as that of the Titans, and went up to the palace. A risky move, yes, but anything would have been. Really, he knew that his father would never allow him to live. Should his existence be discovered, and everyone knows nothing stays secret forever, and this way was the way that least likely to backfire horribly, he hoped. I don't know, he introduced himself. He picked a random name and said he was the son of one of the Titans who lived far away, I guess. No one tried to call him out on it. Anyway, what reason would anyone have to lie? Yes, lying was widely understood concept by now. Remember when Gia told Oronis that she wanted to smash and definitely wasn't planning murder, even though the slow ones twigged onto it at that point, but whether they understood lying or not, no one was expecting it, and if someone was clever enough, Titans were somewhat suspicious of this random stranger insinuating himself into their society. They put their suspicions aside when he proved to be handsome, charming, personable, and entertaining for the crowd, and Cronus was impressed. He got hired as a cupbearer on the spot. Well, he hadn't gone in there with the intention of gaining access to the unguarded drinks of the being he hated most in the world, but he wasn't exactly going to turn it down. Now, was he? A windfall's a windfall. Now, I've read a few contradictory versions of what happened next, some saying that he made his move that very night, others that he waited years to build up trust before anything happened. It's probably somewhere in the middle of that. Honestly, Zeus being patient for years seems somewhat unlikely, but Cronus the crooked one, trusting him unconditionally instantly, seems even more so. They were probably a few weeks or months before Zeus figured out he could get away with slipping something in the goblet. No, not poison for one. It probably wouldn't have worked too well. Immortality is a good defense against assassination attempts. More importantly, if it did kill Cronus, it will certainly kill the defenseless young gods trapped in his stomach. Zeus didn't want that. So he had something different in mind. Two somethings, in fact. Well, it was a big party, a feast for some reason or another. Maybe it was the Titans' collective birthday or the anniversary of the day Kronos gave his dad the choppy chop or something, but everyone was there. Zeus was cupbearer for the whole event. He was in top form the entire time, joking with the guys, flirting with all the ladies, keeping everyone's goblets topped off with nectar, generally just making sure everyone was enjoying themselves. The feast lasted into the night, and by the time it was winding down, people were getting pretty sleepy. Some were even passed out on the lounge chairs, and a lot of others were well on their way, more than might be expected. Even at late hours, Zeus, of course, was still lively as ever, so was Kronos, notably. What? Would he really do that? I mean, there's one hell of a conclusion to jump to, and spiking everyone's drinks would be one difficult endeavor. Do you really think that's what he was doing? Well, you're right. That was part of the cunning plan. Part 2 began right as Kronos started noticing that everyone around was usually sluggish, and just as the hay was going on was leaving his lips, Zeus stepped forward to offer him a very special goblet containing a little more than just nectar. Actually, I think I remember reading that the concoction inside it was mostly based on mustard seed, so it deeply amuses me to envision Kronos chugging a glass full of Dijon mustard, but unfortunately that's probably not exactly what happened. Fairly similar outcome though. What? No, Kronos yielded groceries. No, you could not. Fine, then prove it. Prove it. No, you're the one who said you could drink it, so put your mustard where your mouth is and go get the condiment. I'll wait. I'm not drinking with you. I'm not stupid. You brought this on yourself. Oh, now you want me to keep telling the story. What getting scared? Now we're gonna test this later. Don't think I'll forget, but fine. Back to Chromos vomiting. First out comes the knight's ambrosia and nectar. Then out comes a large rock. Then in reverse order of their birth. Out come Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Demeter, and Hestia, who immediately grew to full size. Kronos was moaning and groaning, clutching his gut, and oh yeah, the gods aged while in his stomach. They just couldn't grow. As soon as they were free, they were able to assume their true forms. Although I seem there was a decent learning period where they figured out how to walk upright, use their powers, speak with vocal cords, all this stuff it was really hard to do in a tiny cramped space. Oh, that's a really good question. I don't know if being confined like that stunted their powers. That would be a good explanation for why Zeus was more powerful than all the rest of them, and also for why the eldest of them had the least power. Usually it's the opposite of that, but if it was dependent on how long they were imprisoned for, well, that would imply that the gods' powers were constantly growing, at least for a time, but it would have to be a long time, long enough to have 5 children after Hestia, and for Zeus to grow up and everything. The counterpart to this whole thesis would seem to be that all the gods' children, like Ares, Persephone, were significantly lesser in power than their parents, without any remarked upon proportionate increase in skill like the gods had to the Titans, but I suppose it's possible that the skill was some kind of fluke and power in all of them came in proximity to chaos. I'll have to think about that. I'm not sure there's some kind of obvious proof for it or evidence against it. I can't think of it right now. I don't think I've ever seen any retelling of the story postulate that, though the interesting I'm very skilled at going on tangents, not much else. Where are we going? Where were we again? Yes, Kronos was in agony, rolling on the ground and holding his stomach, probably his throat too, and none of the Titans were anywhere near awake enough to do anything about Zeus grabbing his siblings and shepherding them away. Maybe he shape-shifted into a giant bird or something and carried them. I don't know. Some method of conveyance. He removed them from the zone of danger and found a safe place for everyone to recuperate. Yes, there's the adjustment period. Teaching them to speak ancient Greek probably went pretty quick. These were divine beings after all. Teaching them to use their powers less so, because some things you have to figure out almost entirely for yourself. Zeus did what he could, though the gods learned to channel their divine energies to shapeshift, and I don't know what else did they do. Poseidon and Hades at least learned how to punch really hard. The girls didn't get out combat training on account of their gender, of course, but theirs was probably more magic focused. I haven't heard any stories about Hestia striking the ground so hard that the earth split and a tidal wave poured forth, have you? Demeter wasn't exactly known for lifting mountains and throwing them at her enemies. Those three were certainly powerful, just in a different way. No, it's not redundant. It's self-defining. It tells you everything you need to know by telling you everything you need to know. Shush. Which one of us is telling this story? Why do I have to keep clarifying this? You are far too opinionated for your own good. Well, no, I'm allowed to opinionate it. I'm the one telling the story. You can keep your editorials to yourself. The disrespect! All right, then, you tell the story. No, go on. What happened next? What do all the gods and goddesses do to avoid the wrath of the Titans from there? Interesting idea. And once they'd finished with that, somehow I don't think the Titans would have been too impressed. And come on, you know this. Think about it. What were the disadvantages Zeus needed to overcome? Precisely, he needed a weapon. And by now, the others needed weapons too. So where did they get them? Unfortunately, no. I think Gia was going to be much help anymore. The sickle was one-time deal. Also, probably not of the other primordial forces. Pontus probably wasn't going to do much. Orenus was gone, and Tatras had no reason to help other side. Although, come to think of it now, I want to know what kind of weapon Tartarus could make. What could that even be? The sword of the pit? The spear of hell? This sounds metal as fuck. I want one. Well, oh yeah. There was no scythe of eternal torment, unfortunately. The gods had to get their weapons from somewhere else, and he was reliably informed that well locked away in Tatra's deepest, darkest, smelliest hole, the Cyclops had learned blacksmithing, and the 100-handed ones had learned the art of stonemason. Actually, I don't know where he got that info. Maybe when the Titaneses told him. I think at least one of them had prophecy powers. More likely, now that I think about it, it was Oceanid by the name of Metis, who had the gift of wisdom and foresight. She was very firmly on the god's side, or at least on Zeus's. I guess it could have also been Gia, but I hesitate to attribute too much to a being I've described so firmly as a very eepy girl. Vaguely inconsistent within the narrative I'm attempting to construct. I don't know, man. Sometimes the stuff contradicts itself. Sometimes I just plain don't know what happened. You may have noticed there had been approximately 12 billion different versions of every single myth recorded down the generations, but I've only read 11 billion of them. I'm trying to piece together the most common threads and the bits of the consistent sense, but that was the uphill battle. You could almost call it a Sisyphean task, a task like the Sisyphus He's never mind him. Maybe I'll talk about him later. If I do like a Hates greatest hits highlight reel type thing, but doesn't matter now is that every single version of the story you'll ever find agrees precisely on what happened next. Zeus and company headed down to Tartarus to go find a blacksmith they needed. It wasn't an easy journey, no. Finding a way there in the first place was difficult, but shape-shifting made it possible. Once they made it into the pit, there were more monsters than you could count in a lifetime waiting to snack on immortal flesh. Tartarus had been busy. So I think he created next the night totally on his own, then created Hemera the day also alone, but then all the monsters came from the union of Tartarus and Nyx, the dark and the depths. Not super relevant, but possibly gross enough to be interesting. Yeah, me neither. The gods were also not fans of the whole arrangement and brew, but busied themselves sneaking past everything to get to the deepest possible part, because they knew that's where beings as powerful as their uncles would have to be imprisoned. Well, they got there. They realized that there wasn't much down at the bottom of the pit except rocks, metals, and lava, which explains where giants learned their trades, I guess. And the one very large monster from before Kempe, no one wanted to try to take her on. Zeus decided the stealth was again the key. Perhaps I should clarify. No one wanted to try to take her on before they had their weapons, which reasonable. So while Kempe was off bullying the 100-handed ones, the Hundos from now on, Zeus took the opportunity to sneak up to the Cyclops. Psst, hey, you big guys, you like this pit? Not particularly. What are your feelings on sunlight? What is sunlight? It's like fire, but it doesn't hurt, and it's even prettier. A small conference among themselves. We like sunlight. Sweet, if you can make us some weapons, we'll kill that big ugly monster and take you guys to some sunlight. Your brothers too, you in? Now the Cyclops had been imprisoned for years upon years for the simple charm of being ugly, in fact, which Kempe never felt the need to cease reminding them of. Hearing Zeus call something other than them ugly made them break into the biggest, scariest grins you can imagine. I'm sure it's the glorious sight. Hey, I'm always a fan of a little well-deserved payback, and boy, were the Cyclops ready for it. They'd wanted her gone for what seemed like an eternity, but every time one of them tried to build something that would work as a weapon, Kempe interrupted before he could finish it, even though he could complete it. The Cyclops had no powers other than the prodigy's strength and skill at metalwork, and Kempe was designed for killing. That wasn't a winnable battle. The arrival of the gods solved one of those problems neatly, though, and quick idea from Zeus got the other, and suggests that each of them make part of a weapon so it could be done before their warden got wind of it. The Cyclops closest to Zeus, I don't remember their names, I'm sorry, would assemble it real quick and toss it over. They figured they could do this 6 times before there was any interference, no problem. Well, it started all right. The Cyclops worked quickly and efficiently. Somehow they seemed to instinctively understand the right implement of destruction to assemble for each god. Zeus got his first, of course, jagged glowing spear, almost as tall as he was, and he held it for a first time. The air around him crackled with power. He could work with that. Next was Poseidon, a trident of gleaming silver and foamless mystery. When he took its handles, the earth shook. Why this distant alert can't be, I don't know. Maybe earthquakes were fairly common. And Tartarus but Poseidon was well pleased. After them, Hades got something that was much less obviously a weapon. Just a helmet with what seems like nowhere near the destructive potential bastard as it was in his hands. Terror rippled through the air, and the other gods fell back from him in fear. Putting it on his head turned him invisible. The aura of fear around him only grew stronger. Hades saw the potential of this and smiled coldly, but no one could see it, so he took the helmet off and smiled again, just to make his point perfectly clear. Yep, the big three, as they come to be known, were now ready for action. And good thing too, because it was right around now that can't be figured out what they were there. If I had to guess, I'd say she felt the fear from the helm of darkness, failed to recognize that emotion it was, but no, she didn't like it, and decided to kill whatever was causing it. She found the god's hiding place easily. Once she knew she was looking for someone and came on, howling fit to give your nightmares. The gods were already nervy because of the hat, and onslaught of this kind of monster was enough to make most of them break and run. Most of them. Not Zeus. Zeus had hidden all of his life. Now he was done hiding, and he was done running. He had a new weapon, channel for his power, a bolt of lightning held in his hand. It was time to find out what it could do. We met Campy's charge head on, spear in hand and glowing, as he funneled everything he had into killing this monster that had somehow become the symbol for everything he couldn't fight right before: his rage at his father, his frustration, and being forced to live. Like a hunted animal. His desperation against forces he knew were more powerful than himself. It all went into the spear, and the spear responded, and the lightning came. Tartarus lit up, the brightest, purest white light the pit had ever seen turned its eternal night into day, just for an instant. When everyone could see again, all there was where a monster had once stood, with a pile of ash and cinders. Now they could take on the Titans. Zeus had his army and had his weapon. It was time for war, but first it was time for grabbing the prisoners and getting out of there at all speed, because there were far too many monsters in Tartarus, and every single one of them was howling with fury at intrusion into their domain. Yeah, nope. Maybe they could 12v infinity, but there was no reason to try when instead they could just take the fight to their real enemies. Oh yeah, Zeus explained to the Cyclops and the Hundos that while the guy who locked them up originally was gone, Kronos had deliberately left them imprisoned and thus was deserving of their vengeance. The giants thought this over and agreed, although it was probably most out of loyalty to the people who busted them out of prison. Oh yeah, I'm sure there was a lovely touching scene where the 6 of them got to see the beauty of the earth for the first time ever, got to feel the warmth, and that didn't cause pain and touch green. Leaving grass. Come to think of it, there was probably a similar scene shortly after the gods got out of Kronos' stomach. Maybe I should have talked about it then. Yes, feel free to imagine the tears streaming down their faces and joy in their hearts to see heart's content. To your heart content, maybe there was a cute little tableau where someone picked up a bunny rabbit and cuddled it for a while. Anyway, back to the world-spanning purchase war. Yeah, you'll have to deal with emotional whiplash. You'll be fine. You know who might not be fine? The gods. It's now 12 against. Shit, I don't even know how many. Few dozen at least, probably less than 100. A lot. Well, it would have been more, but most of the nature spirits were trying to avoid getting squished and thus staying out of the way, and Rhea had been busy. Yeah, she came in pretty much clutch here, went around to a lot of titans and titanesses to try to convince them to stay the heck out of it. Well, frankly, Kronos hadn't been a good king. People did what he said or they got stabbed, and that was the basis of his power. I don't think he committed atrocities on his own people aside from the baby incidents, but telling everybody, throw me a feast or you die, didn't make him a super popular. To add to that, a lot of nature spirits, even though those were the children of the Titans themselves, got treated like second-class citizens. I think there's a story about him killing one of Medus's sisters because she cried in his presence, which is why Medus joined Team God. Kronos didn't have many super fans. He did, however, have plenty of loyal subjects. Well, most of the guys stayed on Kronos' side, but the ladies weren't super violent in the first place and had no trouble promising not to fight. As for the non-combatants, a few notable powerful titans are relevant here. Helios and Selene, the sun and the moon. Titans promised neutrality as long as Zeus promised to keep them driving around the sun and moon chariots, which Rhea said he would. Prometheus could see the future and he knew how it would work out in the end, so he and his brother Epimetheus didn't get involved either. It liked to point out that if he'd chosen to actually throw in on either side, it might have ended totally different, but maybe there's some caveat to his powers, like it'll happen if you are not part of it or something. I don't know. I should say that for unknown reasons, he didn't attempt to convince his other brother Atlas of any such thing. Maybe they weren't on a great terms. I would hope they weren't for Prometheus' sake. Because otherwise that looks kind of bad, man, throwing your bro under the bus like that. I disagree. Oceanus was fine just chilling in the oceans named after him, yes, and not causing problems. All of Kronos' greatest allies stood with him, though, while Rhea was trying to convince her sisters to give him peace a chance. Kronos was rallying his brothers, the Titans of the cardinal directions, to come with him and hunt down the upstairs that would try to obliterate them all, while Rhea was negotiating with Helios and Selene. Kronos was getting Atlas, largest and strongest of them all, to serve as his general. When it all shook out, most of the physically powerful, personally dangerous Titans were standing with their king, while most of them were smarter or just less violent. Titans were off in the silence. No one actually agreed to fight alongside the gods. I should note which didn't much to engender good feelings between the generations, but non-interference ensured their survival, whoever came out on top. Well, now each side was ready. Kronos had his sickle and his army of Titans, all fired up to kill the treacherous gods. Zeus had his siblings and his mighty uncles, and all of the big three had their Cyclops forged weapons, each capable of causing problems on a massive scale. All that was left was the final climatic battle, right? Yeah, not quite. The Titanomachy, as you know, I came back to be called lasted 10 whole years, and I wish, really I do, that I could spend the next 4 years going in depth on battle tactics, casualty reports, territory won and lost, all the interesting stuff, but that kind of thing didn't really happen. Oh no, there were battles. The war was fierce, but there wasn't an analog to mortal wars that's easy to find because everyone fighting couldn't die. Yeah, no, shoot him with a lightning bolt, smash him flat with your fist, drop a mountain on his head. Sooner or later, your enemy was getting back up. The only way anyone had found for getting rid of an immortal was what happened to Ouronos, desecrating the corpse so hard that it could never ever heal. But neither side was willing to allow that happen. There was any battle lost so badly, any route so completely uneven that the combatants couldn't have time or brain power to grab their fallen allies and drag them off. So, as such, there isn't very much to talk about. From a Titanian's standpoint, there was a territory being fought over. Most of the strategy was just yelling "get him" at the top of his lungs. It was war of attrition. Where neither sides lost resources. All that happened was destruction to the land. Oh, absolutely. Scorched earth, leveled hills, new canyons carved out. Some of the battles were on such large scale that they made Gia shift uncomfortably in her sleep, and boy, that caused upheaval. More than one conflict was called on account of avalanche, and neither side could gain a definitive advantage. 10 years went by like that, and by the end of the decade, everyone involved was pretty damn tired of endless war. Demeter's soul was crying out for all the green-grown things that had been destroyed. Atlas' sword was weighing heavy in his mighty hands. Yes, he had a sword by that point. It was a divine weapon like the sickle, but it cut things. Zeus was tired of watching his siblings get hurt or killed by Cronus. Wasn't done. Every time things even seemed to approach a lull or a ceasefire, he was back up, exhorting his brothers with threats of what the gods would do, promising treasure to whoever brought him. Zeus had vastly overestimating their collective ability to win this war. Just one more battle, guys. Come on. The war couldn't end until Cronus was gone. But every time they came close to him in a battle, he retreated to his mighty stronghold in the top of Mount Orthus. He wasn't so brave when faced with foes who had weapons as powerful as his, but while he was in his palace, no one could touch him. Something about that place made him stronger. Aside from just its defensibility, the gods tried attacking it a couple times, but while he held the throne, his power over time was amplified enough that nothing could approach him without risking getting turned to dust. Usually his chronological powers weren't super useful in battle against immortals, which is why they haven't come up much, but they pretty much stopped him from ever losing his stronghold. And as long as he had Retelling, the other titans would never surrender either. They would fight for their king. Zeus was getting pretty sick of all this. By the end, everyone was but he was so close to finally accomplishing his life's goal. He could feel it. He and his brothers and sisters kept gaining the advantage over the Titans, only to see it slip away. And every time it slipped away, it came with another image that would haunt his dreams. Hades couldn't have Demeter, her limbs crushed by rubble, Hera bleeding out on the earth. Sure, they'd all heal eventually, but that was his family in pain, and try as he might, he couldn't prevent it every time. He had to end this war. He had to kill Cronus. He'd come so close before, but only his murderous father didn't have such a strong place to retreat to when he was pressed. Wait a second. Zeus had an idea, a good one. They were going to destroy Cronus once and for all by attacking him where he least expected it. Before anything else, he went to Metis, the Oceanid, with the gift of wisdom. He asked her about his plan, and she gave him good counsel, helped him refine it before possible suicide run to the dam. This might just win us the war. Oh yeah, her advice had become indispensable over the last decade, and Zeus started noticing long ago how nice the dresses she wore made her look, how pretty her hair was, the way her eyes glimmered like the sun on the water. But that's a story for later. For now, she was just an important concealer who joined their team because she believed in Zeus' mission to get rid of Cronus. He went to his allies and explained the situation. There was a debate and discussion, proposals and counterproposals. Eventually, though, Zeus and Medea's plan, with a few additions tacked on, won out. The gods realized it was their best chance at bringing the war to an end. The next morning, they set out ready to climb a mountain. Oh no, climbing Orthus would set off tons of alarms and defenses. At least a dozen titans would come running immediately. That was a surefire. Way too atomized. No, they climbed the mountain right next to Orthus, the second tallest mountain in the world. They climbed Mount Olympus. I can feel you thinking, oh yeah, it's coming together. No, I'm not going to do the voice. You do the voice. You were thinking it. I do have to prove it. It was obvious. I could see it in your eyes. You're not going to give me this break on this, are you? Fine. The gods climbed Mount Olympus. Oh yeah, it's all coming together. That good enough for you? Too bad. It's all you're getting. Anyway, at Mount Olympus, they went, not using their powers and moving from patch to patch of cover. As quickly as possible, the plan depended on secrecy. If the Titans reached them before they began, they'd be trivially easy to stop, and from there it would be impossible to make an attempt on like this again. There were some close shaves when Titans flew by in a bird form, and Hades had to use his helm a few times, but they made it to the top in one piece, well, in 12 pieces. All of them were perfectly alive and whole, Yeah, all of them were there. This was all an all-or-nothing attempt, and the more godly power they had, the more likely they were to succeed. Once they reached the peak, they laid down and waited for cover of darkness. The Titans kept a watch, of course, but any plan is easier to carry out when most of the enemy force is asleep. That's science. Once it was well and truly nighttime, with no moon to point them out, at the Titanic centuries, one mountain over the work began. Hestia, who was starting to discover an affinity for fire, lit small blazes so the various beings could see what they were doing. Demeter, who was the same but with plants, guided the mountain's moss and ivy to grow in specific patterns to weaken stone and loosen great boulders from the ground. Cyclops then broke said boulders loose as quickly as it was possible to do, and passed them to Hundos, who were waiting for a full load of rubble. Once all 300 hands each had a rock refrigerator size or larger, it was time for all hell to break loose. Zeus abandoned stealth and shouted a mighty war cry, aiming the most powerful blast of his lightning he'd ever released at neighboring Orthres. At the same time, Poseidon struck his trident against the ground, focusing its earth-shaking abilities on the Titan's palace. Hades, wearing his helm of darkness, concentrated on the Titans asleep in their beds, or suddenly surprised unwatched. It made them feel the most primal, well, eroding fear they'd ever known, and the Hephaestus' 100-handed giants, guided Hera by Hera, launched enough stone and rubble to level city directly at the center of the mighty fortress where Kronos slept. Well, yes, you'd be right. He wasn't asleep anymore. He sensed the sudden expenditure of power from where he slumbered and woke immediately. Concentrating on his time dilating powers, whatever was happening, he was going to be ready for it. What he couldn't stop from getting through, of course, was the primal fear of hate, but Kronos will survive, was ironclad. He managed to hold the terror at bay long enough to cross his sleeping chamber and reach the sickle with the hat in hand. He started to feel he could take on anything in existence. The fear began to recede. His lungs formed a rattling cry. Zeus' lightning bolt hit, even slowing down time. Can't keep out something that moves at a third of speed of light for long. Kronos was thrown backwards and the palace shuddered, but that wasn't the end of it. Right as he was getting ready for getting his bearings, the whole building started shaking beneath his feet, and the power of Poseidon was doing its work, cracking the foundations and destabilizing the structure, and finally, under the concentrated power of the big three wielding the mightiest weapons ever forged, even Kronos' powers faltered. He fought to hold it, but the time dilation failed, and before Kronos could do anything but mutter a curse, half a mountain top landed on his head. You'd think that's where it ends, right? Nah, overkill is the only kill. When it comes to titans, the gods and giants kept their barrage for the rest of the night. When the sun rose, they looked on in awe at what they'd accomplished. Not only that had they destroyed the palace, containing the majority of the Titanic forces, they'd actually sheared off top of the mountain quickly, and which quite honestly obliterating a literal mountain could at your enemies. This is where we get the context for beatdowns and mythological scale. This was impressive. When they were done, naturally the hard part remained. They had to dig through all the rubble and find each shadow-broken titan one by one to make sure they could never be threats in the future. This took some time. Atlas was, by virtue of sheer, overwhelming physical power, had been buried mostly uninjured, so when he finally found him, he was ready to fight, but he was the only one. The Hundos subdued from him after a short scuffle. And that was the last battle of the Titanomachy Kronos. Hyperion, Koios, Krios, Iapetus, Atlas, and all their various allies, which brought Zeus in chains and most of them grievously injured. A few hadn't been in the place at the time and took some hunting down, but upon being met with overwhelming force, all surrendered quickly rather than face obliteration. Whom had nothing more than follow the king they'd ever known. That would be a gruesome endeavor indeed. Throw them into Tartarus. Tartarus clearly not as escapable as previously thought. Beings with power like Kronos would be back eventually, and obviously no one even suggested letting them go. Now, after fighting so long and so hard, there would be justice. It wasn't easy to feel good about the justice for most of them, though you see, Kronos had lost to the blows to his head. Fracturing his power had done major damage. He couldn't stop ranting and raving, constantly spouting a crazed mix of gibberish, death threats upon all who came near, and maniacally laughter. Maybe it would have been scary on other terms, but when he was in chains bound before them, most of the gods found it pathetic. This hated field monster who'd stolen their childhoods and their lives, tried to kill them hundreds of times, who'd been the source of all their nightmares and secret fevers. Reduced to a babbling lunatic, this wasn't the righteous vengeance they'd always sought. The only one who seemed truly happy was Zeus, who'd finally accomplished his purpose. All of that was left in his eyes as he was a throne, but first he had to deal with the Titans. For Kronos' hated murdering father, he had no mercy. He echoed the slaying of Uranus and chopped the Titan of time into little pieces. The other gods thought about objecting, but no one wanted to get on Zeus's bad side, especially not for their little worst enemy. They watched as the babbling stopped and screaming began, and then as that eventually stopped too, from there Zeus considered doing some of the rest of the Titans. But ultimately decided to slightly less genocidal. He told them all that he had the power to kill any of them forever at any point, and they ever tried shit again, he wouldn't hold back. They believe him. I would have too. But no, he didn't let them go. That was just to make sure they wouldn't try to escape attempts from Tartarus, where he threw them to set out eternity. Apparently the Hundos volunteered to be guards for them down there, which I don't really get, but maybe they were less fans of sunlight than I originally thought. At least they were free to leave any time. This time they weren't getting constantly beat up by Campy. So I guess they were happy enough. As the Titans were being let off, Zeus noticed a few of them, the directional Titans smirking and muttering at each other. He got suspicious and asked them what was so funny, and as they were trying to convince him nothing at all, you wouldn't get it. At last decided loudly go about the joke they were playing. Yes, I remember earlier when we established that those 4 Titans each had to be at a corner of the world, otherwise the sky would fall and smush everything? Yeah, they couldn't do that from within Tartarus. As soon as they got sent to the pit, Earth was done for. If I die, this country goes down with me. type deal. The Titans, especially Atlas, found the pretty funny. Unfortunately for him, though, Atlas' reward was explaining the joke was becoming his punchline. Zeus decided that the simplest way to solve this problem was just to restructure the way the universe worked. The corner Titans could get locked up in Tartarus as long as they weren't required to hold up the sky, so he made it so they didn't have to hold up the sky. No, he couldn't make it support itself without Uranus. That was beyond even Zeus' power. But what he could do was change the way it was supported. He reshaped the sky so that instead of needing to be held at four corners, it only needed to be held at a central point. Physicist versus engineer, Unfortunately for that central point, though it had to be bare the entire way of the sky, it was manageable with four Titans. They could exist fairly painlessly and go do other things with larger portion of their power, like fight in a war, but with just one. Well, he wouldn't have been able to think with the burden weighing down upon him, much less fight gods. And who could this burden go to, other than Atlas, strongest of the Titans, less injured and most rebellious opposing side? His was the only real fate worse than death that Zeus decided to dole out. The man was a rough one. It was as a consolation prize. He's now known to all as the Brewer of the Heavens, and that's a cool title. I still rather not my bones not be compacted, but he's gotta take the ones he can get. Well, after that happily ever after, right? The gods established their new palace on Mount Olympus, now the tallest mountain in the world. The Cyclops became the blacksmiths of the gods and did the work they loved. The Hundos went back to Tartarus, but this time as wardens instead of inmates, and glad of it, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades drew straws over who would get to be king of the sky, the sea, and the underworld, respectively, and they each got the element to which they were best suited. Zeus married Metis, and two were deliriously happy together. The neutral Titans mostly faded back to the sidelines and chilled as the world changed hands, and Prometheus decided to create a small and insignificant little life form without much relevance to anything else. Humans, everything's good. Ha, I wish. No. Gia hadn't watched everything that happened, being very unconscious for many years, but when she next came to, the first thing she noticed was that half of her children were still in Tartarus. Sure, it was different half, but come on. This was not the plan. She got very upset. Things degenerated from there. But like you asked for the story of Titanomachy, and that's getting into Titanomachy, and we'd need even more context and backstory. Gotta talk about where Athena and Ares come from. The story of Hercules, Dionysus, and all his stuff. It'll take a while. You want to deal with that today? Yeah, me neither. Besides, before anything else, you need to drink a glass of mustard. I told you I wouldn't forget.